All right, well, welcome everyone to today's Process Optimization Academy session, the first of 2023. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. So this year, we're going to scale back the Academy sessions level. We're only going to be doing once a month instead of twice a month. We already have a bunch of foundational content out there for you in the form of recordings. So we're going to make some adjustments. What we're going to do, you'll see some adjustments to the webinar invite, first of all, so you might get some cancellations. We're going to figure out how to do that with the least impact possible to you. And then I'll be posting the scheduled dates on the Academy landing page for the future sessions. But to supplement the Academy, or in addition to the Academy, we're going to start up a video blog series. I think they call them vlogs. And they'll be focused on specific use cases or inefficiencies. So maybe once a month, we'll post a new one, specific use case, little video on kind of how to attack it or how to approach it. We figured that'll be a different way to get the content out there since so many people are watching the recordings. Now, for today's session, we're going to focus on different ways to isolate or filter mine data to identify potential opportunities. There's a ton of flexibility within the analyst workbench itself to do some ad hoc questioning, and some of the capabilities might not be jumping off the screen for those of you that are new to the analyst workbench. So we wanted to cover those today. And of course, though, we have to get the Academy logistics out of the way for our newcomers and those who have stumbled upon one of our recordings for the first time. So the purpose of these sessions are to help us all get better educated on ServiceNow's in-platform process mining capabilities. We'll provide how-tos, practical guidance and use cases, product updates, and as a group, we'll just exchange ideas and collaborate so we all continue to get better. How these sessions will work, we'll have a scheduled topic that we'll cover usually for the first 30 minutes, though, as those of you that have been here before, you know I typically go over. One of my resolutions this year is to try to keep these a little bit shorter than I have been. Then we'll open it up for questions on the chosen topic for that session, and then we'll open it up for questions above and beyond the day's topic, sort of like an office hours. The sessions will be recorded and eventually posted on the community. Finally, feel free to post your questions in the Q&A section or the chat. So for situations where we don't have answers today, and for you, we'll follow up and post them to the process optimization community, or maybe use them as a topic for a future session. Now, this is the slide that says anything we say and do here today can't be held against us or me in the court of law. It's also the slide that says, as part of these conversations, if we make any forward-looking statements about what might be coming in the future on the platform, you should take them as such forward-looking statements, make no decisions based on them because they're always subject to change. I'm assuming all of you have now read the fine print. For those of you that I've not met before, my name is Dan Grady. Been at ServiceNow for about 6 years, and I'm part of the process optimization product management team here at ServiceNow. What we'll be covering today, we'll do a little bit of a process mining 101 for our first timers, and then we'll dive into the topic, which is about isolating opportunities in the mine data. There's some, I always kind of like to say that we're going to look at things today that are going to help us have a conversation with the data, right? You see something, you ask the map a question, or you ask process optimization a question, the data answers you back, and then you ask another question. And so a nice back and forth. So we'll start out talking about some of the pre-built insights that come with process optimization. I like to call those conversation starters. And then we'll dive into the different ways in which you can start asking questions of the data in an interactive ad hoc analysis type of fashion. So we'll first cover those things in slideware, and then we'll jump into a demonstration so you can see some of them in action. Then we'll open it up to questions. We'll talk a little bit about how to get started if you're not already using process optimization, and then we'll share some additional resources above and beyond these Academy sessions. All right. So as always, quick process mining 101 for the newcomers. With everything we do, there's a design and desired path in our minds for how it should work and how things should be playing out, whether it be events like these Academy sessions or a workflow on the ServiceNow platform. And when you design things, you not design for efficiency as well as completeness to provide the best experience possible for as many people as possible. Now, unfortunately, what we design isn't always what ends up happening in reality. The reality is that not all the work flowing through the processes in our organizations is going to take the optimal path, and that's going to have a negative impact on the experience that both employees or customers requesting service are having, as well as the people that are working the process have. Now, identifying what is actually happening within our workflows and then improving upon them isn't always the easiest thing in the world. Now, what in-platform process mining or process optimization allows us to do is use the audit log data that is generated as records move through a given workflow on the ServiceNow platform to create a visual representation of what is actually happening within our given process. And this new level of visibility helps us accelerate our ability to identify inefficiencies, non-conformant process activities, or improvement opportunities. So process mining is going to give us the ability to answer process questions that have historically been pretty challenging for a lot of us to answer. So where many of us have traditional analytics like dashboard that allow us to answer questions, more what style questions about our processes, like process mining is going to help us answer the whys. So things like, where is our process stuck? Where is the rework happening? Where are tickets ping-ponging between groups? Where aren't we conforming to the process we've designed? These are all things that have historically been difficult to answer and act upon. And now in a couple of clicks with process optimization, you're going to be able to start answering those questions. We here at ServiceNow like to say process optimization is going to get you to the why behind all of those KPIs that you have on your dashboards. All right, on to today's topic. And I'll run through some concepts and slides, like I said, and then we'll jump into the instance. And let's first touch on some of the ways opportunities get presented to us before we even get to the visualized process map. These are the things that I like to call the conversation starters. Whoops, going the wrong direction. There we go. So first and foremost, we have one of my favorites. We've got our finding definitions or insights cards that come with the content packs for each of the workflows. Or you've got the ability to create these insight cards on your own for common inefficiencies that are unique to your organization. Now, we've got a whole Academy session dedicated to these finding definitions or insight cards and how valuable they are. So we're just going to touch on them briefly here today. But from a standpoint of kind of starting a conversation or narrowing down and isolating your mind data, you simply have to click on one of these insights cards and it's going to take you to a set of records that met the criteria that you set up inside of the definition. So for example, we'd be in this one on the slide here, you'd be taken to a map of the 18% or 6,200 incidents that are going through one or more hops or reassignments. So it's like the solution is saying, hey, here's a conversation we should be having about this workflow around improving it, right? So it kind of starts the conversation and allows you to dig in right from there and isolate the data. The next one is we have our variation analysis, and this highlights specific routes, and then we can click on the view workbench option from here to bring us to a map of records that took that route. One of the things that we'll look at in the demo portion is people don't often realize that you can use some filtering on these routes right here on the summary insights page, and that it's super helpful to help you narrow down some opportunities to improve before you even get to the process map. So we'll look at how you can filter these out and how helpful that might be in the demonstration. Then on that same summary and insights landing page, you have your bottleneck analysis, and that allows us to focus on different transitions or hops within the workflow. One thing that I'll point out is that many people don't know that you can adjust the bottleneck analysis to focus on one specific activity set. So when we create models, we typically either create a model with assignment group as our activity or state, or both. If your model has both, you can isolate which activity transitions you want to focus on, and then right from there, jump to the map itself. So maybe you want to look at how things are moving from group to group or state to state, or any other transition that you might have set up with an activity definition. Now, we also ran a separate Academy session specifically on automation discovery. So if you're interested in digging or seeing a deep dive, you got to check out that session. But at a high level, automation discovery uses machine learning to cluster unstructured data in the records we mine, and then match those clusters to a pre-built taxonomy of automation opportunities. One of the things that many people overlook, and it's because we kind of hide it until you mouse over, so you might not even know it's there, is that when you get to a given opportunity, let's say in this case that you see on the slide here, we've kind of got 2,500 records that were clustered and matched this ITSM issue hardware troubleshooting opportunity. If you wanted to, you could come and you could generate a visualized process map of just those 2,400 incidents. You see the little option on the right-hand side of the screen. Again, not a lot of people, one, know that automation discovery is connected to process optimization, and it's a super helpful capability, again, for starting a conversation on where you could be looking for improvements. But that ability to jump right to a process map is super powerful, super helpful if you want to start digging into the data a little bit deeper. So those are 4 different situations where the solution itself presents opportunities for us to focus on sort of a jump start on our analysis, those conversation starters, if you will. Then we have a number of different ways to slice and dice the data once we get to the visualized process map itself in more of an ad hoc fashion. As I like to say before, we're really starting a conversation with the data, and then we continue that conversation when we start doing ad hoc analysis, a back and forth, ask a question, get an answer. That answer is probably going to generate another question. So we want to have this ability to go back and forth, and these capabilities allow us to have that back and forth with the data. The first and most obvious capability available to us is to filter the data based on breakdowns, which we configure. They allow us to start slicing and dicing the map based on structured data in the record. So things like assignment group, priority, channel, category, anything that's a drop-down list or has a magnifying glass on a record, we're going to be able to use that to start breaking the data down. One interesting example that we'll look at when we get to the demonstration portion is folks don't always realize that they can use reassignment count as a breakdown, and that's super helpful for helping you identify ping-ponging that's going on or long-running sort of routes that are out there that are adding to your resolution times. The piece that people sometimes overlook when we start thinking about the breakdowns is they're not just good for filtering the map. They have a data component to them as well that provides insights like the average resolution time, the number of records, or the average duration, sorry, and the number of records, or the number of steps within the routes themselves. And these can be super helpful if we use them and start filtering them as well. For example, the one that I've got on the screen there is kind of show me all the assignment groups that have an average duration greater than 10 days and over 100 records in them, or in this case, incidents that went through that assignment group. Super useful type of analysis to do. You can use standard condition builder filtering on the records that have been mined. So of the mined data, maybe I only care about incidents in the software category that are P1s and P2s with zoom in their short description. And this condition filtering also supports dot walking and related lists, which we'll look at in a second. This again is something that has been there and is there within the product, but if you notice, it's at the bottom of that list, or the breakdown list. So sometimes I find customers have overlooked that this ability exists, or it doesn't jump off the screen to them. So I wanted to make sure we pointed that out today, that you had this ability. Now, we've got this related list condition builder as well. So condition filtering support, this is something that in addition to the condition filtering that there. So if you're not familiar with related list conditions filtering, you're not alone. It's something that has been available for a while within the standard platform reporting, but sometimes it goes overlooked, right? It does pretty much exactly what it says. It allows you to apply filter criteria to data that is linked to a record via a related list or a related table. A very popular use case that we see is looking at the has breached value on the task SLA table for an incident or any task really. So maybe you got a requested item, and you know those requested items have a bunch of tasks associated with them. Perhaps you just want to filter out and show items that the task, one or more of the tasks associated with them, have breached their SLA. This would be how you would accomplish that using that related list filtering capability. Again, we'll look at that in the demonstration portion. We've got our transition filtering that allows us to create combinations of activities to isolate on the map. So these are useful for isolating records that are bouncing back and forth between states and groups. And then as we're going through and having all these different conversations with our mine data, sometimes we'll want to save a certain filter set so we can come back to the conversation later. So for all my Harry Potter fans out there, this is like when Dumbledore is storing his memory in that pensieve. I think it's called a pensieve. But what it also is useful about these filter sets is that it summarizes the key statistics based on your criteria. These filter sets are aligned to the project. So as you mature and start scheduling these jobs on a regular basis, you can always come back to them and they'll have your stats right there within them as well. A very common ask that's on the roadmap is to be able to start reporting on the data from these saved filter sets. And it's certainly something that we're looking at accomplishing for you. Then the last option I want to touch on today before we jump into the instances is variation analysis. So this allows us to isolate specific routes that work is taking. But much like the breakdowns, I don't think many realize that you have filtering capabilities on individual route data as well. So you can start asking for routes that have greater than X number of steps and take longer than a month. But maybe I only care about the ones that have more than 50 records that took that trip. So you can start narrowing it down. This is particularly useful when we're applying to, let's say, assignment groups. So when we get to the demo, we'll look at how we can apply this to assignment groups in a project. All right, let's jump into the instance and take a look at some of these things in action. So I'm going to come over here. Hopefully I haven't timed out, and I'm going to come in and start on my summary and insights page. And we'll just look at some of the kind of conversation starters, if you will. First and foremost is our insights card. So if you haven't seen these before, right, we mine a set of data. In this case, we mine 34,000 incidents. And these insights cards, which come out of the box with the content packs, they start saying, hey, here's some things that you might want to start looking at. Did you know that you got 22,000 instances, or 65% of your instances are taking longer than 7 days to go from resolved to closed? Or one that we'll spend quite a bit of time on today is these 9,300 records or incidents that are going into awaiting user info. So right here, jumping off the page at you, here's some things that we should be talking about from an inefficiency perspective. Then we've got our variation analysis, right? These are the different routes, in this case, 66,000 different routes that these incidents took to get to closure. But that piece I was mentioning earlier is this ability to come over here and say, hey, I want to start filtering these routes down. And maybe I want to look at the ones that got steps that are greater than, let's say, greater than or is 10 steps in the route. And you know what, if there's only one record in there, that's an outlier that I might want to dig into, but let's look at the ones that have more than 10 incidents in this case that taking those paths or routes. And I can apply that, and there we go. And we'll start looking at them. There's 7 that met that criteria. And you can see I've got a bunch of these, each of these here that are towards the top, they're all involving things going into awaiting caller info. So clearly, awaiting caller info is an opportunity for us to focus on, and that was indicated to us above also with this finding definition that we were looking at earlier. That's an area that we'll definitely dig into. And then I mentioned the bottleneck analysis. So whereas variation looks at the entire route, bottleneck allows us to look at the individual hops, right? So we could break this down by assignment group or state, or look at all the transitions that are going on. Once we find something interesting, we've got this view process analysis that's going to jump right to the map. So giving us that head start. Same with these here. If I just wanted to jump to a map of these 64 incidents that took this path, I could click this button. It would take us right there. Now, the other conversation starter, in addition to the summary and insights, is that automation opportunities tab inside of process optimization that we could look at. In this, again, mentioned we have a whole session on just this piece. So not going to dig into all of them, but as I come down here, right, what this is using is, again, machine learning to start doing some clustering, mapping it to an out-of-the-box taxonomy to give us some direction in terms of where we might have some ability to automate and drive some self-service inside of the organization. So if I come down here, I've got these 2,400 incidents that match this ITSM issue hardware troubleshooting opportunity. I could open it up and get some additional details, but this is where we need to improve from a product perspective, But you'll notice if I hover over this, I've got this open process map option. So if I wanted to drill in and generate a visualized process map of just these 2,400 incidents that were clustered together and matched this automation opportunity, I could click on this and it would jump me to a map of just those. So again, we're hiding it. I don't know why. Something that we're adjusting in a future release, but it's there for you to get you started. All right. Let's come in here and we'll use, since we know that awaiting user info is an opportunity for us, we're going to use this finding card to start that conversation. So I'll click on that and it's going to jump me into the analyst workbench, isolating it to just those records that are going through that awaiting caller info state. And you can see that all my lines are coming in through here now on the map. Let's talk a little bit about the breakdowns, right? We talked earlier about breakdowns in the slides. Left-hand side, you have the ability to set up breakdowns based on any structured data that you have on a field. Again, magnifying glass or drop-down list are typically good opportunities for you here. In this case, we've chosen to break this down by channel, assignment group, and category. Now, most folks use breakdowns to start filtering or isolating certain areas of the map. So I could come down here with my breakdowns for channel. I start looking at things like the records that are coming in via self-service, the average duration, and the routes. And I see something here. Maybe I noticed that my email channel has a whole additional week of duration above and beyond some of my other channels that there. So I see that, the data tells me, hey, this is something you should look into. I can then isolate that. All right, so now I'm just looking at things that came in via email and went to awaiting caller info. How I might want to see that is I can come over here to this applied filters and I get to see which filters have been applied, and then I can clear one or all of them if I want. In addition to that, I can look at filter sets that I've saved in the past. So if I like this filter set, I can click on save, and then I can start saving these filter sets and using them and applying them in future runs of the mining for this specific project that I have here. So in this case, I've saved some data around breached SLAs or criteria, save some criteria around breached SLAs, as well as incidents that are affecting Exchange servers. And I could jump to any one of those. Now, I'm going to clear these filters, do this a few times today. So I'm going to clear those filters and get back to all of my 34,000 incidents that we mined in this case. As you just saw, right, we go through here and I use this to filter. I kind of use the data to help me understand or decide what I should be filtering on. This data is super powerful from an analysis perspective as well. And that's, if you start using this filtering criteria, it can be very helpful. So let's come in here. Maybe I want to start looking at my assignment groups. And I want to, let's say, break them down or filter them by assignment groups that have an average duration that is greater than, let's say, 30 days. Maybe I'll say greater than or is, just to make sure I get some data. And you know what? I want to make sure that they've handled a few. So let's say greater than or is 10 incidents that are going through there. And now I can hit apply and I'll start getting answers. And I start seeing things like, hey, I've got two groups in which their average duration for their incidents is over 30 days. This one happens to be 2 months and 1 week. And what's interesting about this is not only do I have 2 months and 1 week, which is a pretty long time, those 24 incidents only took 2 different routes to get to closure. So that's a problem area, right? It's not like they're going all over the place. There's a specific process that's being taken that we should be investigating, because if it's happening over and over and over again, that same process is taking 2 months, something's going on. There's something I should look into. All right, now I can clear these filters. So that filtering of the breakdowns, useful way to start doing some analysis. Now let's move on to, let's say, the condition builder. Again, it's all the way down here. So for some of these that are using higher resolutions, you might not always see it down here, but it's available to you. And we can start building out conditions. Now these conditions get applied to the record as it exists right now. So, you know, kind of what state or assignment group or short description that exists today on the record. So just keep that in mind when you're building out these criteria. So maybe we want to say, I only want to look at the incidents in which the short description contains, let's say, Zoom. And I also want to find the ones in which priority, if I can type it, priority is one of these, let's say critical, and not and, get rid of that guy, critical or high or moderate. And now I can take this and I can apply this filter to the map itself. All right, and I'll see that a bunch of these, and I'll just blow up the map a little bit. A bunch of these now are coming in and going through that Solana billing piece, which seems weird to me that something around Zoom is going in via a billing assignment group or being assigned to a billing group. That's an opportunity potentially to look at, right? I've got a bunch of these here around Zoom going to that group, something that I might want to focus in on. Now, another thing that we can look at is the related list that I was talking about earlier inside of here. So if I came back to my condition builder, I can say, if I click on this related list condition, you know what? I want to look at, let's say, incidents that have tasks that have breached SLAs. So I've got the ability to say, hey, on these related lists, is it greater than equal to some conditions? I'm going to say greater than or equal to 1 here. And the table that I want to look at is I want to look at my task SLA table. So this has been connected to incidents, the incident table. So if you go down, you'll see a kind of related list on your incident itself. And I can say, hey, in that table, if any of the records match this condition, has breached, is true, I want to look at that. So it's going to show me incidents in which on their related list, they have a task SLA that has breached equal to true. So it's a way for you to kind of start looking at tasks that are breached that are tied to, let's say, a parent record in some way, shape, or form. And my demo data doesn't have an assignment group here for that, but that's okay. Another example here, let's just clear all again, is let's say I want to look at or start filtering it by the affected CIs. So if I come in here, I've got an affected CI related list. So I'll say again, greater than or equal to 1. And I want to look at the affected CI related list. And we'll say the CI is, I'm going to use my Exchange server demo data here. Exchange server SDO5, and we'll hit apply. So now I'm looking at the records that have an affected CI in a related list that was equal to that value of Exchange SD051. So related list conditions, really, really helpful in starting to kind of even further narrow down or have a conversation with the data on the map. Let's clear all those criteria. All right. Next piece down here. So we've looked at filtering our breakdowns and using breakdowns as filters. We looked at using conditions, and then we've got transitions, right? Transitions are going to allow us to say, well, let's look at certain steps and the order they've been taken within the process. So we know that this awaiting caller info is an area of interest to us or opportunity. So maybe I want to look at all the tickets that went from awaiting caller info to in progress, and then back to awaiting caller info. And now I can hit apply, and that's going to narrow down the map to just show me those tickets that took at some point that path. And you can see in the map, we're just focusing on those, and that's why those lines are bolded. We got this little 8 of these things cycling through in progress to awaiting caller info and back to in progress, or awaiting caller info to in progress and back to awaiting caller info. Super useful, those transitions. Usually people start using those transitions as part of their finding definitions for those insights cars up front, so they just jump right to the map, but you can do it in an ad hoc fashion within the map itself. Now, you can also do or use transitions if you want to start doing like ping pong analysis or group analysis. So I want to look at that, but when we think about using assignment or doing analysis on different assignment groups and how things are moving from assignment group to assignment group, it's very often useful to create a brand new project in which you're only using assignment group as the activity. So that's what we've done here. Instead of having state and assignment group in the same project, I like to break out assignment group analysis into a single project itself. So I'm going to come in here. That's what we've done in this case. Same set of incidents, but instead of state as our activity, we're just using assignment group. And you can see that here, if I come down on my summary and insights page for this project, the only finding definition that jumps out or is immediately shown to me is the multi-hop issues. So incidents that are going through 2 or more reassignments. And then as I start looking at those other conversation starters, my variation analysis, you'll see it's showing me my groups here, and the bottleneck analysis is just focusing on groups. If we jump into the map, the first thing that you'll notice when you do this type of analysis or create a project that's just focused on assignment groups is very often it's going to be very flat right up front, because you're going to see all the first assignment groups that thing are going. And to me, this looks like an onion that somebody's stepped on. That's here. You're going to see this more often than not. This is going to be the first thing that you're going to see if you create a project that's just assignment group. Now, one interesting way to start analyzing this data if you have an assignment group project is to come over here and create a breakdown on your reassignment count. All right, so normally we do things like channel, assignment group, category, priority, but reassignment count is also very interesting and a unique way to start narrowing down the map. So I've got my different reassignment counts. One of the things that you'll start noticing here very often, and this makes a lot of sense, if you look at the average duration, as our reassignment count increases, our average duration typically increases, which you would expect, but it's fun to watch and see where the big jumps are inside of the data. Now, maybe we only want to focus in on tickets that have been reassigned, let's say, more than 4 times. So what we can do here, or 4 times or more, so we can select them all, then say, I don't care about the ones that have no reassignments. I don't care about the ones with 1 or 2 or 3. I want 4 and above. So I can come in here and I can apply that filter. And now I'm just looking at the cases that have been reassigned more than 4 times, right? And I can blow this out a little bit if we wanted to. Just one way to start doing your assignment group analysis of things that are bouncing back and forth, the path they're taking from different groups to different groups. I'm going to clear this. Now, let's say we want to start using that transitions, like I was saying before, and we want to say, let's look at things that went from Solana billing to our Solana customer support service group back to the billing group. That seems like an interesting path that would have been exposed before. Like if it goes to billing, then to support, then back to billing, that seems strange to me. So we can apply that and look at that. So now we're looking at these 26 cases that went into billing the first time, and then they got transferred to customer support, and now they're going back to the billing group. And they're actually going back pretty quickly. So those folks are looking and saying, no, this ain't us. So let's look at those 26 cases and see what's going on with those. So we can take those 26, say, hey, these are things that need to be handled. Is it a training opportunity? How do we start adjusting it so they don't take that extra ping ponging that's going on or transition that's going on there? So useful way of analyzing the data using either the reassignment count breakdown or that transition filter between the groups. And I'll just clear this out. Now, the last thing that we can look at using variation is the variation analysis piece. And I like variation analysis very specifically on these projects in which we're just doing a group analysis. So I'll come over here to variation analysis. Again, this looks at the different routes that things are taking inside of here. But I also have the ability to start filtering on this just like I do on the breakdowns. So maybe I want to start looking at the routes that are greater than or equal to 5 steps. And again, I want things that have a little bit of volume to them. So I can come in here and say, but I only care about those ones that are, let's say, greater than or is 10 incidents that have taken those routes. And I can hit apply here. And now what this is going to show me, if I start sorting this instead of by highlights, but by total records, I've got these top 2 here. If I mouse over it, you'll notice at the bottom of the screen there, I'm seeing I got things going from Solana customer service support to billing back to Solana customer service support. Or the other one, or the next one where I got Solana customer service to Solana tech support and Solana customer service support. That back and forth seems a little strange to me. If I want to just show that route, I can do that. And if I look at this, what's interesting is these come in here, they go there, and the day they get transferred over, and then it's taking 4 weeks for this group to pass those back to this group over here. Like what's going on with those 26 there? And then right from here, if I wanted to, I can get to just those 26 records and start doing some follow-up analysis. So useful way to start analyzing the data. Specifically, I think the variation analysis applied to a project in which you just have assignment group as your activity set. those are just some of the examples that I wanted to walk you through here today. And then I'll pause now and I'll open it up for any questions on anything that we covered here today. I think you should be all off mute, but just in case, if you're not, if you don't want to take yourself off mute to ask a question, you can put it in the chat or you can put it in the question and answer section. Anybody have any questions they want to ask of what we just covered? Based on what we just covered? Take silence as a no. And we'll just move on to the next piece here. So now that you've seen some of it in action, maybe for the first time, you're saying to yourself, what do I do next? Well, we've got a now learning course out there called Process Optimization Essentials. It's actually just recently been updated to the Tokyo release. It's about 90 minutes or 45 if you do it on 2x speed. Really useful next step if you go out to that and take that course. Then you also have the ability to activate process optimization in your sub-production instances. So if you wanted to go ahead and try it out, you can mine up to 4,000 records. If you wanted to go and do that, the plugins that you would need to activate, one is the core process optimization plugin. And then for the individual workflows, whether it be ITSM, CSM, any of the customer service, financial, customer service industry workflows, or HR service delivery, we have individual content packs that contain those finding definitions that you saw here today, or those insights cards. So you're going to want to activate the appropriate content pack or process optimization content pack for the workflow that you're going to be analyzing as well. So just activate those two plugins and you can go ahead and get started. In addition to those things, as well as all of these different Academy sessions and the Now Learning courses, some other useful resources out there for you. One is we've got a great Now on Now white paper. We've applied process optimization to over 40 processes now here at ServiceNow. We've written a white paper detailing the process that we took to roll out that program. And also it highlights some of the initial findings that we had across a few different workflows. We also have a great Forbes article written by our Chief Analytics Officer or SVP of Analytics, Vijay Kotu. It really talks about the impact of process mining on employee experience. You probably found this Academy session or the link to register for this via the community forum, but if you didn't, be aware that there is a community forum or product hub, I think it's called, specifically focused on process optimization. Myself and other members of the product team are constantly monitoring that. So if you have any questions or just things you want to talk about, or maybe ideas for future Academy sessions, please go out there and post them on the forum. You'll get your answer usually within a day or shorter than a day. There were a number of knowledge sessions last year. They're all recorded and available via that community. And then if this is your first time and you want to learn more about how you should be getting started with process optimization, we did a getting started with ServiceNow's in-platform process mining live on Now session last year. So it's a 1 hour recording, basically gives you the why and what of process optimization, but also walks you through the plugins that you need to turn on and then creating your first project to start analyzing some data. So if that's something that you're interested to learn more and get started on your own, that live on Now session is really, really good for doing that. All right, last chance for romance. Anybody have any questions or anything that they want to talk about before we call it a day? Oh, I see somebody's got their hand up. Yep, Roman, is it Roman? Yep, I can hear you.
Cool. Hi, Dan. This is my first session, so thank you.
Oh, welcome.
Very informative. Thank you. I have a question about the availability of the plugin itself. You mentioned sub-production instances. Does that mean it's not available on developer instances? Yeah,
it's a very good question, and you're spot on. Because process optimization uses the machine learning infrastructure to do the heavy-duty number crunching when we do the mining. So in order to minimize, essentially eliminate any impact on the main instance itself, when you kind of hit the mine button to generate the project, it harvests the data from the audit logs and then passes that off to the machine learning infrastructure to do the heavy lifting, and then it spits the finished model back in. The personal developer instances, or PDIs, they're not wired up to the machine learning infrastructure. So unfortunately, process optimization is not available on them. That's why we recommend the sub-production instance. Or if you're working with your account team, they can procure a proof of value or request a proof of value instance for you to try this out on.
Okay, it makes sense. But for the sub-production instances, does the same logic applies as for the other application? So that means there's no billing involved.
Exactly. You can turn them on. The limitation is that you're only going to be able to mine up to 4,000 records. So you get this little sample mine option. So you create your project. Let's say you want to look at incidents for the last week for a certain category. When you hit mine, you're only going to have the ability to get 3,600 incidents or whatever the records might be.
Yeah, but that sounds more than decent, I would say. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. All right, I see another hand up. Marius, you want to ask your question if I pronounced that correctly? I think I unmuted you, but if you're still on mute, I will maybe post your question in the chat. It looks like I've unmuted everyone, but
they're self-muting, Dan.
yeah. But all right, let me see. Perfect. So one of the questions is, hey, which techniques that we just covered are going to be the ones that will be the most useful in yielding and analyzing when you start analyzing data? What I would say is, first and foremost, those finding definitions, the things that come with the content packs. Typically, when a customer first turns on process optimization, they run their first mining. When those finding definitions pop up on the screen, they uncover things that you've never seen before. You're like, wow, this is all I did was basically create what is the equivalent of a report, hit the mine button, and now I've got things that are conversation starters for me. So I would say those finding definitions, really, really powerful, very useful. If you haven't already watched the Academy session on finding definitions, highly recommend it. Then the second one is going to be is the breakdowns, in my opinion. Those breakdowns, not just in kind of the breakdowns with the data that's inside of the breakdowns itself. They're usually a great guide for the first thing that you should be looking at on the map after the finding definitions. So using breakdowns, let's say the average duration, maybe like we did here today, filtering on the average duration and the number of records. Very, very helpful in terms of identifying where you should, second step, let's say, in your analysis that you're doing. To me, those two are kind of the ones that I see most customers getting value out of first. And then some of the things that we covered here today are things that customers could be getting value out of or using more. They just didn't know, which is why we had the session today on those topics. Any other questions or things we want to talk about? I see one here. Can one set up conditions filtering most often empty optional fields in order to find hints or maybe? Roman, are you still unmuted? It might be helpful if you kind of talk through that one with me. Or I will hit ask to unmute. I think I understand your question. I think the question is, hey, I want to identify incidents where a certain field is empty. And that might be, if that field is empty and we filter the conditions, we start seeing there's certain categories or types of incidents that average duration are longer because we have that field empty. Maybe we want to switch that to a mandatory field. If I believe that I'm understanding that question correctly. I believe the answer to that is yes. I probably have to go back and just double check in the instance to make sure is empty is an option in the condition builder. I believe that it is.
Hey Dan, it's Junior.
Yes.
It is possible on Tokyo patch 5. So that's coming in January. So I'm not sure if it's already released, but
Perfect. That's so Roman, it's a good thing Jeroen is here, so it is possible, and that's a very good use case. Actually, I think something that one might think to make a finding definition, so it's kind of acts as a conversation starter rather than somebody having to dig into the map to find it. Cool, good one. Any other questions, comments, things we want to talk about before we wrap up? All right. With that, just one, thanks again for your attendance here today. I mentioned at the beginning that we're going to be scaling back a little bit and just making these monthly. Right now, this is the tentative schedule that we've got out there. So next session, which will be in February, and I'm going to adjust, it might move to February 24th. I got to see how the dates lined up. But we'll be focusing on what's new in the Utah release for process optimization. So there's a bunch of new enhancements, things like we've made some improvements to the multi-dimensional modeling. We've kind of enhanced that filtering criteria or capability that you saw here today to do some more advanced stuff within the map. So we'll talk about those in the next session. And then one of the other things that we're adding in Utah is we're expanding our coverage. As most of you might be aware, we currently support ITSM, employee workflows, customer service management, as well as App Engine, but we're always expanding our coverage. And in Utah, we're expanding process optimizations coverage to include field service management. So think about looking for inefficiencies and bottlenecks inside of work orders. So on the 24th of March, we're going to have our outbound product manager for field service management on with us to kind of share some of the use cases and some of the value add that process optimization brings to that solution. And then the following session, we'll be looking at interpreting those interconnected process maps. As I just mentioned, we've made some enhancements in Utah, so we figured we push that section back to kind of make sure we cover those new enhancements. In addition to this wonderful academy focused on process optimization, there's a number of other academies out there. Things like the Platform Academy, Virtual Agent, Platform Analytics, and Mobile all have their own academy sessions that are structured very similar to this one and are great sources of information. With that, wrap up here for today. Really appreciate your attendance. Again, this will be recorded and posted, and there's 10 other academy sessions out there that you can dive into if you liked what you saw here today and you want learn a little bit more. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
So